Hello and welcome to another episode of the Life Capoeira with my guest Contramestre Macaco. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. When did you start capoeira? How did you find out about this art?
Let's see. I started capoeira, man, I think it was the 99, 2000. My older brother, Panalzinho, he started doing capoeira about a year, I'd say about a year before I did. And he brought home a beating bout. And so I've always been very, very curious about music. And so, I would sneak into his room. He had to leave it strung up. He didn't know any better. So, I'd sneak in there and like kind of mess with it. One day I saw him trying to figure out how to play it. And I thought to myself, I said, man, this is really cool. So let me try to figure this out. And along with him starting capoeira, there was this VHS that was like being passed around. That's like how long ago I was doing capoeira when everybody was sharing the same VHS. And on this VHS, it was Mestre Spielmeetings Academy. These capoeiristas went to go visit his academy, and man, there was just like so much capoeira on this VHS. It's probably like, I don't know, 15 hours of just capoeira footage. And so I was watching it and I saw two guys, I can't remember who they were. I believe one of them was Master Pelezinho. And they were like stringing up the beating bell and then they were playing the beating bell. So I just kind of sat there and I was watching, and I've always had the gift of like playing music by ear. So I kind of figured out what was going on just by hearing what they were doing. And so I ended up teaching myself how to play beating bow at like 11 years old. And so that pretty much started my curiosity, at least with the beating bow and the capoeira music. And so I did that. Honestly, I was sneaking to my brother's room every time he would go to an event or go train. Man, I did that for like 2 years before I actually started training. And so I think around the age of like 12 and a half, 13, I actually decided to train because my older brother started to teach. And so that was pretty much what started the journey of, capoeira. And I, yeah, I think when I started training, I could already play the beating bow like pretty well. I could already play Salvento Grande de Angola like really clean. Um, before I even knew these names, I could play Angola, I could play Salvento Grande de Mestre Bimba. So it was quite funny coming into capoeira and having sort of that musical background already,
Yeah.
kind of coming into to before I could even jink it, which is so crazy. But yeah, so that's how I got started. And then in my early years, so I trained with Capoeira Manjinga, and then I trained from there. I transitioned to Capoeira Centro Sul, and then from Centro Sul. So Centro Sul is a capoeira group here in California, where I live, in the United States. And then from there, I went to Grupo Senzala. So I was Senzala for a little while, and then I think in 2007. So this is probably like 5, 6 years, 7 years, somewhere around there of capoeira. Then I joined a group, Cordon Gioto. So I was Cordon Gioto all the way up until 2022, so last year. And so last year I started my own capoeira school, Capoeira Savannah.
And I believe the name for that came from Mestre Negativo. What made him choose Capoeira Savannah for your capoeira group?
Yeah, he said that he had a dream, and the dream, it was sort of like in the time when we were trying to decide like a name for, the way that I presented it to him, it was like my capoeira project. I didn't even really have like a school in mind. It was just like some sort of project idea. And he said that the visions that came to him were trees. They came to him in the form of a tree. And so the first tree that he saw was a baobab tree, which is the really interesting looking tree in Africa, but it's in the African safari, in the savannah, And the other tree that came to him was the acacia tree. And so both of these trees, like I said, you'll find these in the African savannas. And so I think the initial name was Baobab that he had given me. But then he was like, I think there's something bigger. Your project, your idea, your concept, who you are in capoeira, it's so much bigger. And I think both of those trees live in the space that you've created. And so he came up with the name Capoeira Savannah.
Nice. Now, the difficult topic to move on to is obviously you with CDO and obviously the sexual assault allegations that were made against a number of the higher up teachers there, and obviously Mestre Suasana himself. Um, what's your take on that whole event and did you sort of witness and see, and how are you feeling now that we're sort of a year or so, obviously, since your group has started, and I think it was around a year or two ago, if I recall, that the allegations first came to light.
Yeah, man, what an interesting situation that occurred. You know, my take on it is I'm glad that these things got out. I mean, obviously, you know when you find out something so horrid, you're like, man, I really hope all parties involved are in jail now. And you know, these things, man, they're so unfortunate that these are the things that we have to worry about in life. You know, I think the interesting thing that happened was there were a lot more discussions, and necessary discussions. I think a lot of the mastities who knew about these things knew that this was the time that they needed to step up and speak, and they knew that they were protected and they had people who were gonna stand behind them, you know, uplift them in their choices to separate from, you know, that group. And yeah, it was interesting because most of my cordon jodo training was here in the United States under Master Pinciado, actually. So Master Pinciado was, you know, the person who kind of got the ball rolling as far as the interviews and kind of the whistleblower, if you will, for the whole situation. And he was a student of Master Spiomini, you know. So yeah, I think that whole situation, man, was it was so necessary. I think it's just devastating to know that a lot of people were really affected by it. You know, the molestations and the promises and just a lot of the evil acts. You know, yeah, man, that was a really tough situation, and I think it was interesting to kind of navigate because you know, people assume, you know, Macaco, you must have known, you know, you were there and you must have known because of your association to all the mastities, and I'm like, you know, a lot of my training was here in the U.S., so not really. You know, you heard rumors, but you never knew if they were just rumors or anything because you know by the time we're here, you know, things are different. You know, in the United States, these guys were on their best behavior, so it was so hard to know if that was the case. You know, but yeah, I did get a little sick to my stomach for sure because you know it's like some of these guys I like ate food with
Mm.
and yeah, man, it was tough, really tough. Yeah, like I said, moving forward, I think I'm really glad that you know people who were responsible for those acts, you know, some legal you know actions were taken and you know the group has done like a major cleanup for sure for those who I've spoken to. But I think most people just left. You know, why would you stick around?
Yeah. And of course, that isn't the only difficulty that you've faced with your capoeira. More personally, I think it was 14 years ago you first started dialysis. How did that impact your training? And obviously, 14 years is a long time. How are things progressing now?
Yeah. So let's see, 2010, the end of 2010, 2009. Yeah. I ended up on end stage, diagnosed with end stage renal failure. And so, you know, end stage kidney failure. And I started dialysis, which, man, in my 20s, it's like, you know, I'm super athletic, I'm strong, I'm training like a crazy person, traveling. And then, boom, I get sick. So life definitely changed immediately. For the first 3 months, I couldn't even walk. You know, my body atrophied so fast. And man, I was going through quite a bit of changes. You know, I think at the time I was taking something like 32 medications, you know, a few times a day. So, you know, like around 64 medications at once. And, you know, even with that, your body just starts to change. You know, I lost a lot of weight. I think I weighed like 125 at one point. And I'm 5'11". So yeah, I went from like 175, almost 180 to 125 in like a week. It was rough. So then, you know, I had to make a mental decision. Did I want to be a sick person or man, did I want to just bounce back, start training again? So just day by day, I took it really, really slow. I think the first day I was able to move around like 10 seconds, you know, wasn't much. Just got up, one Jenga, and I sat back down. Maybe next week or 2 weeks after that, I got about 30 seconds of training. And then, man, one day, I think it was maybe like a month and a half after that, I don't know what it was. I trained for an hour, just out of nowhere. And that day I knew I was like, you know what, I think I could probably push, probably get back somewhat, some sort of training, you know, good routine. And so about 6 months, Yeah, man, I had a catheter in my chest. Nobody knew. I didn't tell them, a lot of people that I was sick, but you could tell because I showed up and I looked like a stick. So people were just like, "You good, man?" I'm like, "I'm all right." Catheter in my chest. I just taped it down, and I showed up to an event. It was an event in LA with it was Master Shada's event, rest in peace, and Master Shikochi was in town. And so I pulled up. People were just like, "Whoa, Macaque, we haven't seen you or heard from you in 6 months. We thought you died. We thought you moved away. We thought you joined the army or something." Like people just didn't know. And man, I played. I remember I just so sore the next day. I don't think I could walk for like a week. I was just like, man. And then I told people, and some folks they anticipated that there was something wrong, but yeah, a lot of people were shocked. They're like, "No, like, wait a minute, you got a catheter hanging out your chest, and you're crazy." And so I think after that day, I knew that I could probably start, training harder and pushing and showing up to events. But I also learned, man, just being around capoeira people, that environment really like just made me feel so good. And I kind of forgot I was sick that day. So I was like, you know what? I think this is something I should hold on to. There's something really special within that capoeira space. And so yeah, ever since then, I never looked back. If anything, I give a lot more to capoeira now than I was, before I got sick.
I guess there's often silver linings to these clouds, although you sometimes prefer not to have the clouds in the first place. But it's you've got to find those silver linings where you can,
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
obviously gone from strength to strength since then. Where did your Apelido Macaco come from?
So Makaku is, I know a lot of people think it's the actual move Makaku, but the Makaku is one of the major cities in Palmares, the community. And so when I was young, so I was like the half age in between like the teenagers. I was a teenager, but a young teenager. The generation that I started with was all like 18, 20, So in between there were the children who were like 9 and 10 and 5, 6, and 7, the little guys, little girls. And so they would always gravitate to me. They would always come around. And so I remember one of the masters was like, "Man, you remind me of the story Makaku because you're like a space of refuge where all people always kind of gravitate towards you. They're always seeking, like, I see the younger kids looking for you to like follow you, and they look for you to like kind of for safety, kind of thing. Like even at events, anytime I would go like to get ready to buy in, there would always be like a bunch of kids kind of like being around me, like, "Can we go to Makaku?" Like, "Are you gonna stand back here and watch me go play?" So it was always kind of like that vibe. And as I've gotten older, it's kind of been the same thing where people go through things with their groups and different schools. And I know I always find people come to me to come learn and just be around because I don't give them pressure to be involved in joining my group or joining a group. I just say, just train capoeira and be around because there's something really special just about people, and sometimes you'll find very unique parts of people, even if they're not associated to your group. So that's where my name comes from.
I,
Yeah.
I think now we're asking for people to come around you to help you because as well as the dialysis diagnosis 14 years ago, so the renal failure diagnosis, um, you've recently been in a hit and run that has left you in a bit of trouble, and there's a fundraiser out to sort of help the support you get you back to your dialysis.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about that incident and how people can help?
Yeah. So Sunday night, which was October 22nd, I believe, um, I was involved in a hit and run. I was driving through an intersection and an SUV. So I drive like a smaller car, and an SUV like rammed into me. Man, it's probably doing about 40 to 45 miles an hour. I mean, it was doing me, and I I didn't even see it because they didn't have their headlights on. So I was driving at night. So what happened was I had my window down, and I could hear a car, but it sounded like when you drive with your windows down, you hear your car. So I thought, man, my car's extra loud. So it caused me to turn. Man, right when I turn, I just see car. And then I was like, ah. So I had slammed on the gas to try to like, move because man, if I was going any slower, that thing would have just ran right into me, my door. And what it did is it ended up hitting my like the back door, the trunk, the tire. Man, it smashed it in about say about a foot, 2 feet. into the trunk. And then I spun. And man, I remember yelling out in pain because I got hit right in my collarbone. Like I felt most of the impact in my collarbone. And so I thought my collarbone snapped. Because that's how hard I got hit. I just remember just like laying there in the middle of the street, like, man, what the heck was that? So I kind of like turned to look and I saw the car there. So then my car just kind of just rolled off to safety. And then I think I was just checking myself because on the driver's side, setting my arm. So I have my dialysis access right here. And so if this gets punctured or potentially clotted, then it becomes an emergency situation where I have like seconds to like figure out how to either stop the bleeding or figure out if I need to make a tourniquet, because it's attached to my heart. So that's why I only have seconds to like figure out what's going on. So man, I was freaking out. There's just so many things going on in my head. And then finally I get out of the car to go see if the car's still there. They were gone. Taken off. So but yeah, I had a little bit of minor whiplash in my neck, uh, parts of the back here, really, really stiff. My upper spine was really sore. And then obviously I had like I still have this bump here on my collarbone. So yeah. But yeah, as far as helping me, I have a GoFundMe account right now. Mm, yeah, I mean, honestly, any donations, anything can help. I use my card to get to dialysis, so it's it's, it's tough. Yeah,
We'll be linking to that in the episode description below. Appreciate it. Times are financially difficult for a lot of people in a lot of places, but whatever you can afford to give will be gratefully received. And thank you if you are able to help Macaco out
yeah,
here. Obviously, it's your livelihood, isn't it? The car and so on. And it's not just
yeah,
your livelihood, but your life with access to dialysis.
right.
Recovering from the whiplash and so on. It's sort of 5 days in. You still feeling it now? Is your
Yeah, I think today is probably the best day. Yesterday I was still feeling it. It's been a little bit cold as well, so the cold weather kind of keeps the muscles a little bit stiff. So I've been trying to use like a heat pad to keep the muscles nice and soft, and I have a massage gun, so I try to like get in those areas. I just trying to stiffen up. But yeah, I think I'm doing a lot better. My chest definitely is what's been bothering me the most, that collarbone area. But yeah, I think most likely by next week should be able to get back to training a little bit and get nice and strong again.
good luck?
Thank you.
The last question I like to ask my guests is, what is capoeira?
Good question. The easy answer, capoeira is a African and Brazilian martial art that incorporates dance elements, fighting elements, music elements, and history. Um, if we were to get deep, what is capoeira? Um, I don't know. I try not to get too confusing about what capoeira. Capoeira is it's so many things, man. It could be a lifestyle. It could be for me. It's been a way of it's my work. It's definitely how I make money. It's how I talk to people. If I can elaborate, when you think of a game of capoeira, and I always try to use this example in the sense of like assuming that there's a lot of people who don't know what capoeira is, right? Mm, When I have conversations with capoeira, you give and you receive, in a very simple way. There's a way of understanding, not getting offended by someone asking you a hard question, instead saying, okay, let me try to understand this conversation. Let me try to be present in this conversation and let me just answer the question that's being asked. Let me not give more than what they're asking. If you play a capoeira game and you respond with too much, it's a little overwhelming. But if someone asks you, hey, why are you wearing that shirt? And you say, well, because it's cold outside and I like the color of the shirt, and it's pretty straightforward. Their response won't be so defensive. And I think capoeira it's an exchange of clear questioning and clear answers, really. Even though sometimes they are presented with something else in mind, because the more advanced you get, you can be a lot more clever with your responses. You can be a lot more clever with your questioning. Mm. But I think starting from the beginning, when I'm speaking about people who don't do capoeira, try to not go that route where I say, well, I'm going to trick you and I'm going to say these things. I think there's a level of comfort that you need to develop with someone before you cross that playing field. But yeah, I think capoeira is we always use the analogy, it's a conversation. But it's a conversation. I would say it's a conversation um, with many paths that you can go. It could be an aggressive conversation. It could be a pleasant conversation. It could be a beautiful conversation. It could be a funny conversation. It could be a conversation about preparation for war. It could be a conversation for overcoming oppression. It could be a conversation about music. It could be a conversation about history. Definitely a conversation about life. So yeah, I think that's for me. Capoeira is definitely a conversation about everything.
I love that answer. Thank you. Are there any closing thoughts or comments you'd like to share with our listeners before we sign off?
And just really, really, appreciative of this opportunity to chat with you and share, my story. Yeah, man, I've been doing capoeira like, all of my adult life, and man, it continues to put me in the path of really, really amazing people such as yourself. And yeah, I love this idea of podcast and us speaking about capoeira. There's so many stories to learn just from conversation. Again, the word conversation comes up in such a special way that I think having more conversations with capoeiristas who've been doing capoeira for a while, and even new capoeiristas, just being so curious to know what's drawing them into capoeira now. I think that ultimately helps us, not only as teachers, but also as just reminding us of what we love about capoeira. So yeah, I think this opportunity has been really amazing, and like I said, I'm really appreciative of this time, space with you.
Well, my pleasure. And thank you also to our listeners for listening. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email thelifecapoeira@gmail.com. And we're on Facebook and Instagram as well. And keen to hear from capoeiristas of all levels and abilities and experience from anywhere in the world. And if you can help with the fundraiser, it would be gratefully appreciated. It's why we have released the episode today, breaking the normal schedule, but we'll be back on track with an episode this Thursday coming, the 2nd of November. So thank you very much from me, and until next time, ciao.